Flyvault.net presents Where the River Bends, a fly fishing short story. And now, Where the River Bends. Charles thought it wasn't much, but it would do for now. The house was old and in dire need of repair, or at least what remained of it. Half of the house had been relocated for preservation. I'll have a window and an upper porch with a wonderful view, a perfect place to catch some fresh air, thought the young attorney. Even though it was in Niles, Ohio, the thought of his first field office must have been exciting. Just a few short years later, that building would become a national landmark, known as the birthplace of the newly elected President of the United States, William McKinley. Charles only worked in that building for 6 months after obtaining his law degree from the University of Michigan's Law Department. It was during his time in Michigan that Charles developed a deep passion for the Wolverine State. This passion would keep him returning to explore its vast landscapes and fish the area with his son for decades to come. By the early 1900s, Charles had held several attorney positions before settling down to open his own law practice. He was eventually elected as the prosecuting attorney for Lorain County in Ohio. As the timbering of Michigan lumber slowed down, Len and his wife Mary bought an old boarding house once used for lumberjacks and other travelers 12 miles south of town off County Road 611. It had nice scenery, including what the locals called the Mayfield Pond. It was a good place to raise a family, and convenient enough for people to come and hunt or fish. Len and Mary would run the quaint, formerly boarding house as a hotel and serve as guides. No early 20th century fishing story seems to be complete without making mention of Ernest Hemingway. He did in fact stay with Len and Mary and recorded the fish he caught as well. What can you say other than the man likes to fish and did so seemingly everywhere? However, it was not Hemingway who would secure Len's place in the history books. In the summer of 1922, a well-dressed, insightful man named Charles came to stay with Len and Mary. While fishing one afternoon, he noticed what seemed like a phenomenon. His keen observation of the insects led him to the tying bench of his host, Len. Charles's vivid description of what he saw prompted him to request a fly that could imitate the random bug dancing on the water's surface. Len, being a gracious host, set to work. Using feathers from the chickens he raised, strands of golden pheasant tippet, and some wool, he skillfully assembled them in a suitable order with black silk, using Len's favorite hook, a mustad. He then handed the fly over to his excited guest, who rushed to the river right away. As nightfall approached, there was no sign of Charles. But when morning came, the strapping fellow returned. Undoubtedly, he wanted another of those effective flies. Len asked, "How did you do?" Charles replied simply, "A knockout. It's simply a knockout." Charles inquired about a name for the fly. Len hadn't named it yet, and one wonders if it even crossed his mind, for it was only created the day before. Naming it Knockout would have been fitting for its impressive performance on its maiden voyage, but Len, ever the good host, decided to name it after his guest. And that decision of Leonard Halliday to name it after Charles gave the world none other than the Adams dry fly, named after Charles Adams. And now you've heard a long-lost story from a tyer's bench, and can share it with your friends when you meet them. Where the river bends. I heard you took your subscribe button for a psychiatric evaluation. When I asked how he did, he jumped up on a chair, shouted, "Hi-ho, silver away," and proceeded to belly flop onto the coffee table. It ruined Mrs. Fugly's crumpets. She punched him in the nose with that ugly stick cane of hers. He ran out of the house yelping like a dog. I can't imagine what the shrink said. Take care, my friends, and as always, happy tying.